Let's have a quick look at the Rocket Logger app and how to analyse the data you can collect from your rocket flights. When you open the app, it will have some placeholder data in here, and it should now have an import and an export data button, so you can bring data back in. If you don't see these, you may need to close and reopen your app so it updates, or if you're on the web version, refresh the web page to make sure it downloads the latest version. And you can see in this version, we've added an import data button, and that allows you to bring back data you previously saved from the app. So if I click on import data, I've got some captured data from a school's rocket flights here, and we're going to go through each one and have a look at what we can see. So we'll start with number 1. So we can see here that it's zoomed in to a period of time at 135 seconds-ish. It will automatically try and find where the rocket flight is, but it doesn't always work. So if you're not sure, you can double click and it will zoom back out to the entire data. And we can see it was probably about right. We've got some data here. This looks like a flight. We can see big spikes of launch and landing and something in the altitude data. So let's zoom into this area. Now, one thing that's happened on this flight is it appears that the rocket's gone down 15 meters first, which obviously hasn't happened. Now, the reason for this is the altitude measurement uses a barometer to detect air pressure, and depending on how the rocket flies or where the sensor is, a pressure wave from the flight can actually register some data here. But we can see after that subsided, we've got some altitude recorded here. So it doesn't look like a long flight, this, so it probably flipped or something on its side, and we can see that went from an altitude of 4.3 meters to 8.4 meters. So not a long flight, it's only 2 seconds or 3 seconds. So we can see this red spike here is probably the direction the logger was orientated in, so it's measured a launch spike in the X direction, followed by probably some tumbling, a bit of free fall, and then a big spike when it's landed. So we'll import the next data. Let's go for number 4. So we can see here it's attempted again to zoom into some data that it thinks might be the launch. This looks more like footsteps, and this does not look like a rocket flight. So let's zoom out. Now we can see some movement here. This flat area here is where the rocket's not been walked around or touched. It's stationary. And some walking. So this doesn't actually look like it contains a rocket flight. So basically it may well be that the data logger stopped recording after 3 minutes, and if there was a flight, it took place after that. So unfortunately we haven't actually captured a rocket flight in this set of data. Okay, so I think this is a good flight. So it's automatically detected a bit of the free fall and the launch spike and the landing spike either side of it, and you can see we've got a nice altitude profile here. So if you zoom out to the whole data, you can see this slight tilt here might be just the weather, the change in pressure over a couple of minutes, but you can clearly see here a big spike in altitude followed by a bit of movement afterwards, and that corresponds down here to what looks like a launch. So you can see some movement here, probably walking. This nice long station period where it's clipped into the rocket and it's not moving. This is probably pumping up the rocket with air, and then here is our flight. So you can see this one reached about 20 meters and almost 16 G of launch acceleration in Z, which if you orient the logger as in the instructions, you'll get the measurement in Z, but you'll get it in other axes as well. And then the landing there. So this was a bit of a longer flight as well. This is about 4 seconds. This weird peak here may well be that the rocket flipped onto its side at that point and then drift over before landing. Okay, let's try number 6. Yeah, so it's been moved around a lot. Maybe there's a station period here, but I don't think there's a flight recorded in that data. You can see the altitude has not changed very much at all. And the next set. Okay, so it looks like it's captured a launch here. You can see lots of acceleration and a sharp impact on landing. Let's zoom out. And this one again, you can see this artifact at the beginning of the flight, a big negative spike in altitude, probably due to air pressure change if the the log is either oriented or placed on the nose cone or it's flipped on its side. But that's definitely a flight, so we can zoom into that. Again, we can see acceleration here. It's a bit messy, so it probably did have a bit of a chaotic launch. And if we look at the altitude just before this artifact, we can see it was at 4 meters and it went up to 15.7, so about 11, just over 11 meters altitude, and it lasted for about 3 seconds. Okay, so we can see this flight here. It looks like it's detected a flight really well. We've got a big altitude hump. Let's zoom out. Ah, great, yeah. So you can see logger sitting on the launch pad, really clean launch, and it's reached a really high altitude, about 35 meters. And if we zoom in again to the launch data, we can see the logger this time was oriented, so the x-axis was vertical, so you can see the big acceleration in the x-axis, followed by a flight and a bit of a rough landing, but that's pretty good. So in this set of data here, another good flight, we can see it looks like it's landed on a roof, but I'm not sure. Certainly the altitude's changed from the launch site to the landing site, so it could be on a sloping field. Looks like it reached an altitude of about 20 meters, and if we zoom into our flight, you can see big acceleration in launch and the landing, and the altitude is a nice smooth flight profile. Okay, let's look at next data set. So I think it has detected the flight here. It's quite a short flight. It's only about maybe not even 2 seconds long. Well, let's look. Yeah, 1.8 seconds. If we zoom out to the whole data again, we can see there's a spike in altitude there. There's a bit of a negative dip, possibly due to the air pressure variance as it's taken off. So this has only reached an altitude of about 6 meters, or just a bit less, as it was already reading half a meter before the launch. So it probably flipped sideways on launch, and you can see something strange happening here with the actual axes the acceleration was recorded in. So this set of data doesn't really look like a flight, so if you zoom out, so that probably detected the wrong bit of the data there as the flight, but we can see here we've definitely got a launch here. So again, you can see the launch acceleration spike and the landing. This also has this negative artifact before reading the altitude properly, but we can see the difference between the kind of steady state altitude reading, about 1.5, and 10, probably about 9 meters flight. Yeah, so that's recorded out fine.